Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be doing a mid-year reading check-in, talking about the best books I've read so far this year, the worst, the most disappointing, my most anticipated. At the time of filming this video, I've read 36 books, and overall, it's a pretty solid reading year. Like any reading year, there's definitely been books that I haven't liked, but there is one in particular that I especially just really makes me angry, and that's actually on this list. There's 14 questions here. I actually added in one because the original was like 13 questions. And I have my Goodreads open, so yeah, let's go. So question one is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2022? And I have two answers for this one. The first is Morning Star by Pierce Brown. This is the third and final book in the original Red Rising trilogy. I have talked about this book already so many times, and just the Red Rising trilogy as a whole, it's one of my favorites. Morning Star was an incredible end to this trilogy. I just love the character arcs and development and just how everything unfolded. I'm really satisfied with how things ended. I mean, the world at large is still, you know, it's still, like I said before, it's still some work to do in the world. Everything is not this like cookie cutter, you know, it's not cookie cutter ending, but it was still excellent. So I love Morning Star. And then number two, this is a recent read for me. Number two is Recursion by Blake Crouch. I just finished this book a few days ago, and it was amazing. I have now read Blake Crouch's like big three novels. I've read Dark Matter, now Recursion, and I've also read his most recent book that just came out, Upgrade, and I did a review for that a few months ago. And I loved Dark Matter and I love Upgrade. Recursion, you guys, Recursion is better than both of them, in my humble opinion. So in the world, there's a phenomenon known as false memory syndrome, and they have these flashes of these, you know, these supposed lives that they have lived. And our main character gets wrapped up into that when he's called to the scene of a suicide. But the phenomenon of false memory syndrome is a product of this memory chair, this invention that was created by another character. And she started this with really good intentions. She wanted to capture memories of, you know, aging individuals and people who are battling Alzheimer's disease. And yeah, really good intentions, but unfortunately it just got into the wrong hands and just a lot of manipulation going on. And where we go from there is just something that I couldn't even anticipate. The very fabric of reality starts to be threatened when this memory chair is put into the wrong hands. And I mean, this book just gets so twisted, and it's good. It's really good. It really makes you think about how in the world could someone even plot a novel like this. There are so many threads, and it just really makes you contemplate life and your own memories and just different timelines of life. Oh, it's so good. This is so good. If you have not read Recursion yet, I highly recommend it. So now I've read those big three, and I've also read Blake Crouch's short story Summer Frost, which is in the Amazon Forward collection, and I really enjoyed that short story. I read that a couple years ago. And then even before Booktube, I read, what is it, Run by him, and that was more like a horror novel, like horror thriller, and I really enjoyed that too. So at this point, Blake Crouch, he is an auto-buy author for me. I love his work. I trust him to tell me an amazing, twisted, trippy story, and it's a lot of heart behind his books too. Like, you just really think you're going to go into this sci-fi thriller and it's just going to be all fun and games, and it is. It's fun. It's a wild ride, but there's always so much emotion tied to his main characters, and just a lot that they like deal with in terms of family and love and loss, and I loved it. Question two is, what's the worst book you've read in 2022? That honor goes to Book of Night by Holly Black. You know, when a book comes out that you're interested in, you know, you take in the good reviews, the bad reviews, but you're not really dissuaded, because you're like, no, I still want to read that. I'm really interested to see what's going on, what's going to happen. Book of Night is the kind of book where I wish I had listened to the negative reviews. So I buddy read this book with Nakia from Nakia's Hideaway, and I mean, we had a great time buddy reading. We had some really great conversations, but I felt really bad because most of the time I was just ranting about how ridiculous this book was. I feel like the majority of the books that you dislike, they're just that. They're just books you didn't like, and you go on with your life and you're like, yeah, whatever. I didn't like it. Not for me. I'm not going to continue the series or whatever. Book of Night, I feel, is the kind of book where you dislike it, but it almost makes you angry at how much you don't like the book. This book makes no sense. It makes no sense. The magic doesn't make sense. There is a mystery at the heart of the story. Doesn't make sense. As you go through the book, the things that you start seeing about the shadow magic, a lot of it is contradictory to what we were already learning about shadow magic in the beginning of the book. There is a really important object that's gone missing, and our main character Charlie, she used to be a con artist for these glow mists, who are people who can control shadow magic. And that mystery, the threads of that mystery just get so unbelievably convoluted as the story goes on. This book is not even that big. It's not even that big, and it's just not, it doesn't feel concise. There is just so much going on in here. There's so many ideas, and it's just not wrapped up into a book. And there's gonna be a second one. Like, what? How? Why? Question 3 is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far this year? And for this one, I had to really think about it, because I've only read like 2 books that are like actual book number 2s in the series. But for the most part, I've read like book 3s in the series, or I started a series or read like book 4. So I had to think about an actual direct sequel. And for this, I decided to go with A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is technically book 2 in the Wayfarer series, but what I'm learning as I progress through the series is that it's not a continuing storyline from the previous book. So each book, I've only read 2, but I think book 3 is the same way. Each book is focused on a different character, completely new storyline than the first book, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. So in book 2, A Closed and Common Orbit, we're following the AI from the ship in the first book. And yeah, the longer this book sits with me, I read it like back in February, and I liked it even when I finished it. But now that it's sat with me for, a few months now, I'm just like, that was amazing. I really loved it. I already enjoy Becky Chambers' writing, so I already knew that I would enjoy A Closed and Common Orbit going into it. But yeah, the longer I think about it, I'm just like, that was nice. So in the book, we're following the character Lovelace, who, after being the AI for so long on the ship, she's just now learning how to live life and make connections and relationships. And there's just so much in this book about like what it means to be human. And it's very Becky Chambers. I don't know how else to say it. It's very Becky Chambers, and just so warm and comforting, and just really an incredible book. So question 4 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. There's so many. I'm on a fantasy kick right now, and there are just so many fantasy books that I have accumulated over the last several months or so. So I'm taking new release to be all the books that have come out so far in 2022, not just like within the last couple of months to be new. But so I have a lot of fantasy that I want to get to. I think the biggest one for me at this point that I'm just like, yes, I cannot wait to read this, is The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. I'm so excited for this book. I don't know why, but I just feel like it sounds like something I'm going to love. I think it's some kind of courtroom fantasy, which is weird for me because I don't like courtroom dramas. I don't watch courtroom dramas on TV. Nothing like that. Movies, that doesn't appeal to me. But for some reason, the premise of this just sounds so good. It sounds like it's going to be a really good mystery at the heart of the story. So I am really looking forward to The Justice of Kings. Question 5 is, what's your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? I am just so unique and original, and no one else in the book community is anticipating this book. I don't even think they've heard of it. It's Babel by R.F. Kuang, really small author. But no, this is like the anticipated release for the year. I seriously cannot wait. All you really need to say is dark academia, literary fantasy, R.F. Kuang. Like, I'm there before you. So I know it comes out in August. I'm looking it up right now. I know it comes out in August, but I don't remember when in August. Hopefully it's the beginning of the month. Fingers crossed. Oh my God, it comes out at the end of August. That's okay. We've waited this long. We can wait a little bit longer. Then my other anticipated release for the second half of the year is Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. I am so excited for this one. Legendborn was one of my favorite reads of 2021, and it was so good. My knowledge of the Knights of the Round Table was not anything spectacular, I was so blown away by how well that story was woven into Bree's story. It was so good, and there are 2 different magic systems happening in the book at the same time. I really enjoyed Legendborn. I cannot wait for Bloodmarked to come out. The first book ended in such a way where the stakes are they're so high, and my fingers are crossed that Bloodmarked does not fall into second book syndrome. I don't think it will, but I have high hopes. I'm very excited. Question 6 is, what's the biggest disappointment this year? I think for this question, this is more than just like, I didn't like this book. This is like, I fully expected to love this book, and I went into it thinking I was gonna love it and that it was gonna be amazing. And for this, I'm gonna have to say The Shadow of the Gods by Gwynne. I feel like everybody loves this book, and I really wish I was one of those people. And the thing is though, I was actually really enjoying it. There are 2 characters in here. One of them, I remember, Orca. Her perspective is so good. Her chapters were amazing. I was on board. I loved her. And then the other female character, whose name I forgot already, she was fine too. Like I wasn't disliking her POV. But there's one character in here, Vard. He's the third perspective. His perspective for me was getting so boring to the point where I was mentally struggling to turn the page. I was like, I don't care. I'm not interested in what he's trying to do. At this point, I don't even want to know how his story is going to wrap into the other two. It all became too much for me. And I just DNF'd the book because of Vard. The second book I have for this is, this one actually kind of hurts my heart to say, but The Final Strife by Saara El-Arifi. This was a recent read for me, and it was fine. It wasn't, I didn't love it, but I didn't love it by any means. I say disappointing because it was actually one of my most anticipated reads for 2022, and it was just okay. We have a society in this book that is broken up by the color of, you know, one's blood. So the people with red blood, the embers that they call them, they're at the top of society. And then you have the blue bloods, who are the working class, the poor. And then you have at the bottom of society the people with translucent blood, and they are the slave class. And the book starts really kicking off when you learn that there are a series of trials that take place in this world to determine the next potential leaders of the empire. And one of our main characters, we actually have three of them, but there are two, Sila and Honor, that we are kind of following, you know, the majority of the time throughout the book. And one of them enters the trials to become one of the next leaders of the empire, and the other one is training them throughout the entire book. And not to be that person, but it's kind of boring. I was really enjoying the training and the trials up until a certain point, but then the training just got kind of repetitive, a little dry, started losing me. The conversations and the banter I just wasn't feeling it anymore after a while. And then there's also a rebellion that's starting to brew again in the background, and one of our main characters gets wrapped up into that again. And then from all that build up from the training, by the time you actually get to a specific trial, there's a few of them, but by the time you get to them, they're over so quickly. It's so anticlimactic. On top of all that, there is so much just angsty romance happening in this book. And then there's so much heavy-handed foreshadowing in this book. It's almost like the characters are spelling things out for you. And after a while, I'm thinking to these characters, please stop. Please, I get it. I understand what's happening in this world. It's not that complicated. Question 7 is, what is your biggest surprise this year? And for this one, I'm going with Lagoon by Nnedi Okorafor. I really love this book. That's not the surprising part though. I think with Nnedi Okorafor at this point, I don't know, I'm used to her style. I'm used to her. I've read several books by Nnedi Okorafor at this point, and she has like a very calm writing style. We're used to going on these kind of slower journeys with characters and watching them grow and develop. And yeah, I am used to the pacing and the writing style of Nnedi Okorafor at this point. And so to come from some of her previous books, like Who Fears Death and like Remote Control and other books, to come from books like that to something just so chaotic and full of action and just is moving at this breakneck speed and flipping between all these characters, it was very surprising from Nnedi Okorafor, but I will say it worked for me. I really enjoyed this book, and I think she pulled it off. It was so much fun. I highly recommend Lagoon. I think on the overall spectrum of Nnedi Okorafor's work, this one might not work for everybody, but I really enjoyed it. Question 8 is, who is your new favorite author, debut or new to you? I'm pulling my Goodreads back up for this one. So I will say I have not read many debut authors in 2022, and the ones I have read, I wouldn't say they're favorites. And then some of the authors who are new to me this year, like, who's new to me? I'm looking at the list. Who's new to me this year? John Scalzi's new to me this year. I am gonna read more from him. I just wasn't crazy about Kaiju Preservation Society, but yeah, he's definitely not a new favorite off of Preservation Society. Jake Kristoff was new to me this year. I really enjoyed Empire of the Vampire, but I wouldn't instantly put him as a new favorite author. Who else was new? S.A. Barnes was new. Dead Silence I really enjoyed that. Wouldn't say S.A. Barnes is new favorite. Nikki Drayton was new to me this year. Prey of Gods was fine. Probably not a new favorite author yet though. Yeah, I don't know. All these other authors I'm looking at, they weren't new to me this year. And I definitely wouldn't call them favorites. Like, I don't know, Sarah J Maas is not new to me, definitely not a favorite. P. Djeli Clark is not new to me, but he's already a favorite. So, you know, I don't know, I have no answer for this one. One that comes really close, not even really close, you know, one that I would like to keep an eye on just in case is Bradley P. Beaulieu. He is the author of 12 Kings and Sharakhai, which I read this year, and I love that book. I think at this moment I would put 12 Kings and Sharakhai like maybe in my top 5 or 6 of the year. I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was a really amazing recommendation from Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. That book was great. It's the first in the series, the Song of the Shattered Sand series, and although it's way too early, you guys, to know if I will even love the series as a whole when I continue, but just right out the gate, that book left such a huge impression on me. Bradley P. Beaulieu left a huge impression on me, so I think he's one to watch, but way too early to be like, yeah, that's a new favorite. Question 9 is your newest fictional crush. I don't get fictional crushes. Question 10 is who is your newest favorite character this year? And for this one, I am gonna say Annabeth Chase from the Percy Jackson series. I started reading Percy Jackson for the first time this year, and I have been having a really amazing experience reading these books. The books like themselves are good, they're fine, but the experience of finally reading them I think is what I'm really loving. And it's so funny because a couple years ago I made a video talking about just popular books and series I'll probably never read, and Percy Jackson, I remember, was on that list. You know, I didn't put it on there for any negative reason. It just felt like, you know, Percy Jackson is so huge and so beloved. At the time it felt like a series that I just really needed to grow up on and grow up with these characters to appreciate it on the level that so many other people do. And I've read up to I think it's the Titan's Curse. I finished that. Having read those 3, I still stand by that this is something that I just would have been absolutely enamored with if I had read these books when I was like 11 or 12 years old. But I am happy that I finally picked them up and that I am reading them as an adult. Yeah, Annabeth is great. She is just so smart. She's funny. She's so innovative, quick on her feet. I really love her character, and just the conversations that she has with Percy, the stuff that they talk about, and the way that they argue back and forth sometimes, it is hilarious. She is definitely the standout character for me in that series so far, so I really love her. She's great. Question 11 is a book that made you cry, and for this one, looking at my Goodreads again, I am going to say Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. That book kind of ruined my life, I'm not gonna lie. Pachinko it's a historical fiction. I buddy read this with Shannon from That's So Po, and that is probably one of my favorite buddy reads that we have done together up until this point. It was honestly an incredible read. Definitely one of the most impactful books that I've read so far this year. So I mentioned it's historical fiction, and it's a multi-generational family saga. We're following a Korean family in Japan. It starts very early in the 1900s when they're still in Korea, but then very early on they moved to Japan, and we're following this family just through the trials and the hardships, and just trying to live, you know, trying to live in Japan, and just in the face of just all of the racism, discrimination that's going on in the country at the time. And on top of all of that, they're trying to survive in the midst of this war. I just think it's amazing how there's one decision, and it seems so small at the time, but our main character Sanja, she makes a decision when she is a teenager that just changes the course of not only her life, but the life of future generations to come, and just affects their lives in just all kinds of ways, mentally, emotionally, just impacts the next generation in just some really heartbreaking and really fascinating ways. So this is also in my top of the year. It was just a fantastic read. And then question 12 is a book that made you happy. A book that made me happy was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This book actually made me feel a lot of different things. I was happy one minute, I was stressed the next, anxious, like just angry at one point. It was so good though. In this, we're following 2 authors, Eva and Shane, and the 2 of them, they met when they were teenagers. Both of them troubled in different ways. They spent 7 days together when they were teenagers, and it was just a whirlwind kind of relationship. They didn't have contact with each other anymore after that until they're adults, and they're these, you know, established authors in their own rights, and they meet again as adults, and they have another 7 days in June, and they're still dealing with a lot of things that they struggled with in the past, and the relationship that they had when they were teenagers. This book is so good. I was just getting happy thinking about it all over again. I really loved it. I love the interactions that Eva had with her daughter. I still remember some of those like lines of dialogue that they tossed back and forth. It was a really good book. I'm so glad I took a chance on that, because I don't typically read contemporary or romance, and I could not have asked for a better read in that category. It was amazing. Another one of my favorites of the year. And 13 is what's the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year, and for this one I am gonna go with, got so many books though that have beautiful covers this year. I don't know, I'm really into this like simplistic minimalist kind of cover lately. That's really speaking to me. So it's kind of boring, but I really love the cover for Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro. I just think that is so gorgeous, and just to see it in person, it's like right behind me, but to see it in person, it's like little, it almost looks like little stars on the cover. It's beautiful. And then question 14, this is the last one. What are some books you need to read by the end of the year? I feel like I have a laundry list of books that I need to read before the end of the year. I think like my top priority TBR at the moment, let me think about this. Well, I would say the first is my current read. So I have finally gotten to it. I'm currently reading Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky and really, really loving this book. So I finally gotten to it. That is one that I feel like has just been like hanging over my head for so long. I'm just like, when am I finally going to read Children of Time? And it's happening. So, and then I would say the next big one is probably A Desolation Called Peace. That's one duology that I've been wanting to wrap up for a while now, so I do need to finish that. One series that I keep saying that I am finally going to start is The Final Empire, well, the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I really want to read The Final Empire before the year is over. So actually that was my summer TBR. So we still have a few weeks of summer left, and I feel like I am going to get to The Final Empire before summer's over, but that is probably like my biggest priority at the moment. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments what are some of your best, worst, disappointing, surprises, all that of the year so far. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.